you so much. In the middle of July, I left this beautiful, soft place on a hill, those highly burnished early days of my presidency at Jewell College, to go to Harvard. I'm fortunate to know Cambridge well. I've spent time there, engaged in seminars on a variety of topics related to leadership and higher education. And so in returning this past summer, I will admit to adopting a little swagger. I strolled down John F. Kennedy Avenue like a native, smiling in knowing fashion at the many conference participants collared by their swaying name tags, and anticipating my first day as part of the Harvard Seminar for New Presidents with a sense of confidence. Some would argue, and persuasively, that college presidents as a breed are overly confident. Confidence is wellspring for our vision and understanding, and conversely, our Lethe, that mythical river in Hades that allows those who drink from it to experience total forgetfulness and willful self-delusion. You're laughing a little too hard at that. Opting for the former definition of presidential confidence, I arrived at New President's Camp at Harvard, brimming with the surety of one who feels called to her new position, a president whose lifeblood is education and who knows that Jewell and she are meant to walk the path of our shared future together. Within hours of arriving at the first class, however, my confident facade changed. It didn't diminish so much as absent itself for a time. Refreshing in its honesty, the New President's Seminar cultivates an ethos of trust. That's its currency. We all were new. We all were energized by this or that, or unsure of how to manage X or Y. And it didn't matter if it was Dr. Drew Faust, the president of Harvard, who in her address to us on the first evening confesses that she gets it wrong about 10% of the time, or the new president of a very large land-grant institution who leaned over one afternoon and said to me, "I don't have the first clue on how to engage in government relations effectively." All of us, the great and the near great and the not so great, were grappling with the enormity of our job description, and the only real bulwark against apprehension that we had was hope. Hope. I often have heard my husband say from the pulpit that the opposite of faith is not unbelief, but rather fear. From this sacred pulpit within the heart of our college, our bold experiment in higher education up here on the Hill, I would preach to you today that the opposite of ignorance is not education, it is hope. It is the hope that people can change. It is the hope that systems can change. It is the hope that inequity will wither and justice will flourish. It is hope not simply for our present moment, but also for our undiscovered future. And to have hope that education matters, that what we do in the world is noble and justified, is, in my view, synonymous with courage. For courage is the closest cousin to hope and cannot exist without it. Dr. Mark English was among the 58 new presidents with me at the Harvard seminar. Mark was attending from overseas, in his case, Afghanistan, where he is the president of the American University there. A graduate of West Point with a PhD in foreign language education and Arabic studies from the University of Texas, Mark is affable and good-hearted, expert but unpretentious, always ready with a joke, and his favorite one was, "If any of you knows a VP for advancement who wants to move to Afghanistan, I'm hiring." Clark, don't even think about it. His stories about women in burqas playing basketball, first-generation scholars seeking an education in their home country, and the cultural bridges built between the university and Kabul resonated with all of us and reminded us that hope is indeed the root of courage. This link between hope and courage that Mark exemplifies was made all too real for us when, on August 20th, 2016, 22 days ago, my friend's university was attacked by militants. who not only abhor the education of girls and women, but also reject the idea that education changes lives and therefore changes families and communities, changes countries, changes the world. During the assault, students barricaded themselves in classrooms to save their own lives, while the university's security and the U.S. military mobilized to free hostages, students, faculty. My friend watched as free, lively educational discourse dwindled nearly to nothing at the saber tip of violence. The smoke rose off the streets and military police formed a perimeter around the university. 12 people, including 7 students, perished. Secretary Kerry denounced the attack as a cowardly assault on talented and motivated scholars. When several of us reached out to Mark after the attack, he thanked us for our concern but insisted that their work would continue immediately. He told us that he was prepared to manage similar assaults in the future because, in his words, the American University in Afghanistan is a lasting legacy and will not be deterred from its mission. Mark is that devoted, that hopeful, that sure of the impact of education on students' lives and therefore on Afghanistan as a whole. Yet when I read this, I knew, all of us from that hubris-filled Harvard class knew that through his heroism, Mark was choosing to ignore those day-by-day, hour-by-hour crises that prevent women, men, the citizens of Afghanistan from being educated. And his endurance stems from his belief that education is our only true bulwark against smallness, myopia, fear. It is also our only true measurement of hope. Days after the attack, and with Mark's experience still fresh in our minds, I contacted my colleagues from Harvard, asking how we could overlay the experience at AUAF onto our own contexts, to think together about how courage manifests in higher education. Over and again, my colleagues' responses conflated hope and wisdom with courage. The courage of a student to stand alongside their otherwise invisible peers during moments of injustice on their campuses, or the courage of a faculty member to explore ideas or texts that some powerful entity had condemned as immoral. I myself thought of the inherent optimism of J.E. Dunn Construction here in Kansas City and members of our Fiji fraternity, who cleaned debris, rebuilt structures, and housed homeless students in the days following the 2003 tornado that ravaged our campus. Certainly, these are examples of courage at Jewell and elsewhere that remind us of the importance of selflessness and creativity in the face of injustice or censorship or destruction. Yet as I heard my colleagues' responses and thought more deeply about Mark's ongoing struggles to keep the doors of his university open to all who wish to learn, I realized that there was something overarching to our experience, our galvanizing mission that bespeaks the hope of the world, the inherent purpose of the human endeavor. It is the courage of higher education itself. Higher education as a hopeful response to fear, ignorance, and oppression that caused my friend Mark to stand his ground and that has brought every one of us to this historic campus here today. The analogy I would draw is to something we all believe to be sacred, our duty as citizens of this democracy. Just as our ultimate obligation as citizens is to be willing to lay down our lives in defense of those whose free speech rankles and offends us, so too is the ultimate obligation of higher education to defend with our endowments, our reputations, our enrollments, the very souls of our institutions, the right of all people to seek and to gain wisdom. Let me be clear. Wisdom is distinct from knowledge. Gaining wisdom requires a different sort of grit than does accumulating information, and yet everything in our culture right now is telling you and me and the parents of prospective students and my two beautiful boys and my fellow presidents from the Harvard seminar that acquiring an education should be easy. Those of us teaching and learning within small private colleges know that the notion of the liberal arts scare the heck out of people. This isn't because our society is unclear as to what a liberal education entails. Rather, the popular culture attaches an obscurity to what we do that purposefully elides the connection between our curriculum and its relevance in the world. The sing-songy and predictable notion that a philosophy major can't possibly achieve any higher vocation than barista at the Bucks is fallacious, certainly, but it's also caught on as a modern-day idiom. And it has fueled this popular belief that it's better to choose a school that eschews philosophy majors altogether than it is to learn how to think, communicate, problem solve, affect change, and find fulfillment as a human being. These experiences require everything from us, an entire lifetime of energy and discipline and a commitment to personal growth. The alternative to acquiring wisdom, collecting knowledge as disparate facts, is not, let me assure you, the approach to education that motivated militants to attack my friend's university. I have spent the last 2 months visiting with leaders in Kansas City and beyond, learning about their perceptions of Jewell and mining their thoughts on possibilities for our future. With frequency, these successful business people are telling me that they need more Jewell alumni working for them. An executive at one of the largest companies in the United States told me that Jewell graduates are the finest thinkers, communicators, and visionaries he's ever had the chance to employ. Our much maligned philosophy major, who, by the way, at Jewell is probably double majoring in physics and playing for the softball team when she isn't in Honduras working with Village Partners, is one of the 99% of our students who are employed in meaningful work or attending graduate school within 6 months of earning their degree. Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce released a study in 2015 showing that students who experience a broad and challenging education will earn more over the course of their lifetime than students who were not as liberally educated. Their soft skills or ability to communicate and think well in all settings are much more refined. And students at institutions that foster higher level thinking, students at Jewell, be they in philosophy or in our civil engineering program launched this fall, are more likely to earn advanced degrees facilitating original research that ultimately improves lives. But I would go a step further than Georgetown's quantitative study with this admittedly subjective observation. Institutions of higher learning that strive for their students to gain wisdom and not simply knowledge or skills are institutions that welcome and expect difficulty. Wisdom cannot arise from a life devoid of challenge, quite the opposite. We who are living through a time when higher education is maligned as out of reach or out of touch or worse, irrelevant, must recognize that diminishing the importance of what we do puts us at risk of elevating matter over substance. As Alice Walker sees it, if you want to have a life that's worth living, a life that expresses your deepest feelings and emotions and cares and dreams, you got to fight for it. Wisdom means fighting hard for an enriching, troubling, ambiguous, illuminating, beautiful educational experience, and, my friends, also caring about and investing in it. That's what we practice here. So it cannot be a surprise in the end that Jewell, which requires our students to work through what it means to be human, was led for 16 years by a man who exemplifies the courage of higher education for me and for everyone in this room. Dr. David Sallee's graceful determination to do the very hard thing, to, in his words, expect our college to address any and all topics with confidence in the academic freedom we enjoy, a claim he made despite the very real threat of losing funding from the Missouri Baptist Convention, came about because Jewell is a place that believes that true wisdom emerges through one's exposure to ideas that both mimic and deconstruct what we think we believe, what we think we know, and who we think we are. It is his abiding faith in this very good and hard work of acquiring wisdom that has encouraged Mark English in his vocation, and all of us here today as we pause to reflect upon another academic year at Jewell. I encourage you to consider your own participation here, honoring these 4 inspiring Yates Medallion recipients and our legacy of teaching and learning at Jewell as in itself an act of courage. It is the very thing that militants in Afghanistan are trying to silence, and the very thing that my predecessor and friend fought to protect at this transformational place up on a hill. I urge you to leave here with me today feeling the impetus to pronounce the essential hope of what we do, or in the words of James Joyce's ubiquitous protagonist, Stephen Dedalus, seeking wisdom always against the backdrop of doubt. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. My friends, this is the courage of higher education, and it is our calling as citizens of the world to uphold it. Thank you. And thank you all for celebrating with us today as we have begun this new year, committed to learning and growing together and serving this great community.